Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to continue Meretz Hashem in Siman Kuf Yud Beis, chapter 112 in Hilchos Pesach. And again, in this Siman also we're going to skip around a little bit to really maintain a focus on the halachas that are a bit more, we'll call them Maisa for us. So the Kitzur writes as follows. It says, Kol Davar, this is Sif Aleph. Kol Davar Shish Bo Tarov Es Chametz, V'afilo In Bo Chametz Ben Rak Tam Chametz, Kigon Shesira Sa Chametz, Mikol Makom Asur La'ashos B'Pesach. Any mixture that has chametz in it, even if there's no actual physical chametz, rather just the taste of chametz. Or for example, again, chametz was there, but then the actual chametz itself was removed. One is nevertheless not permitted to maintain such a mixture over Pesach. Aval davar shelo haya bo chametz klal, elish nispasha b'kli chametz, afilu haya hakli ben yomo. But this is very interesting. What if you have something that doesn't have chametz at all, but it was made in a chametz pot? Even if it was the chametz pot that's called the ben yomo, which means that the pot was used in the last 24 hours, or shenichbash b'kli chametz, or for that matter, it was like pickled or soaked in a utensil of chametz utensil. Motel hashos Pesach. One is permitted to go ahead and maintain this on Pesach. Now, here's what's important halacha to understand in all of this is chametz before Pesach is batal b'shishim. Right? It is nullified in a ratio of 60-1. On Pesach itself, chametz is not batal at all. So therefore, what the Kitzur is saying is like this. If you cooked food in a chametz dik pot, or you made something in a chametz dik pot before Pesach, so technically speaking, again, the blios, what they call the absorptions in the pot, do not make the item chametz, because halacha l'maisa, again, they're batal. On Pesach itself, of course, again, chametz is not batal at all. The dafka shenis bashal nichbash kodem Pesach is what talking about where the item was cooked or the item was pickled before Pesach. Avam nispashal nichbash b'Pesach b'kli chametz chayav levara. But if something was made in a chametz dik pot on Pesach itself, then one, in fact, is obligated to go ahead and get rid of it. So this is a very important halacha. Now, again, it happens to be that contemporarily we don't do this, right? Contemporarily, if something was made on a chametz dik pot before Pesach, we still go ahead and we do not use it. In other words, when possible, we do not rely on the notion that chametz is batal b'shishim before Pesach starts. Okay, we're going to skip pretty much the rest of this siman. We're skipping Beis, Gimel, and Dalid, Hey, and we're going to Vav, the last sif in the siman. Kol hakelim she'einem makshirin lePesach. Any utensils that you're not kashering for Pesach. So let's say again, I have pots, pans, I'm not kashering them for Pesach. You have to clean them. You have to clean them before the 6th hour. Now, the 6th hour, again, is when chametz becomes free. We'll talk about that in the next siman. So you have to clean them well in a way that there's no recognizable chametz. And you have to put them away somewhere where you're not really going to be over Pesach. And it's good to put them in a specific room, to lock the room and to put the key away. So this is a very interesting halacha. So the kids are telling us that even chametz dik pots that I'm not going to kasher, I have to clean them. Now the truth is, this is a little bit different contemporarily, because the truth is today what we can include in the mechira is when we sell our chametz, is that we can also include any chametz that's what we'll call residual chametz, residue chametz on pots, or chametz here, or chametz there. So again, one could sell that. One could also technically go ahead and be mevatel that, right? One could really go ahead and really negate that, use bittul, and make it hefker. Okay, incredible. Let's go like this. Now we find ourselves in Siman Kuf Yud Gimel 113, a very interesting halacha here. Dine Erev Pesach v'dine Fies Matzos. The halachos of Erev Pesach and the halachos concerning baking of matzahs. Here we go. Halacha Aleph. So this is chapter 113, halacha 1. Ein omrim mizmor l'soda v'lo lam natseach. So beautiful halacha over here. We do not say mizmor l'soda in Pesukei de Zimra on Erev Pesach. Why is that? Because halacha l'maisa, the carbon toda itself had 40 loaves, and a number of those loaves were chametz. So the problem is normally a carbon toda has a window of time to consume it. On Erev Pesach, that window would have been significantly curtailed, since chametz becomes totally prohibited by midday. So therefore, a person would not bring a carbon toda, Thanksgiving offering, on Erev Pesach, and because of that, we don't say mizmor l'soda as well. We also don't say lam natseach. Now, why not? That's lam natseach, mizmor l'David. Yancha Hashem b'yom tzah, Hashem will answer me on a day of affliction. Why do we say Erev Pesach? Because any day that has like a Yom Tov element to it, you don't say that. Why? Because the kapitel makes reference to a Yom Tzara, a day of affliction, a day of suffering. But since Erev Pesach itself has elements of Yom Tov associated with it, therefore halacha l'maisa we don't say lam natseach. Halacha Beis. Asur le'achol chametz rak shlish hayom. So this is a very important halacha. One is only permitted to eat chametz really up until 1/3 of the day. So remember again, we'll talk about, we'll put some meat on the bones over here in just a moment. Essentially, well, let me just tell you this now. So already you can't eat Pesach in what we call into the 4th hour of the day. Now remember again, in Halacha, we're not going to get into all these intricacies over here, but Halacha ultimately again takes the day. The day is defined from, well, there's actually a machlokes exactly how the day is defined. We'll generally go with the approach of the Gra, that it's from sunrise to sunset, and those daylight hours are divided into 12 equal parts. So one is allowed to eat chametz up until the 4th hour of the day, and even then, at that point, you're not allowed to eat chametz, but you're still allowed to get hana, to get benefit for 1 extra hour. Ba'ana muter ot sha'achas u'bilbad. I'm sorry. So that is halacha, very important. So one is allowed to eat chametz up until the 4th hour, right? And then ultimately, again, one is allowed to benefit from chametz up until the 5th hour. That's the halacha. After the 5th hour, one cannot get benefits from chametz either. So this is important. So therefore, the Kitzur says one really has to get rid of their chametz and has to be mevatel. It has to relinquish ownership over it before the time for prohibition of benefit comes. So again, you could eat up until the 4th hour. You could get benefit up until the 5th hour. Now, why is this unique? Take a look at it, because interesting. I just want to point this out over here, though we'll see this later on again. The biblical prohibition of chametz begins from midday. What the rabbis did is, because the severity of chametz is so intense, the rabbis backed up the prohibition. And effectively, they backed up the prohibition for consumption by 2 hours. Right? So you're only allowed to eat up until the 4th hour, but they gave you an extra hour for benefit up until the 5th hour. And during that time, up until the time for benefit, you could also sell the chametz. After the 5th hour, you can't sell it anymore. You would actually have to actively destroy it. Okay. Halacha Gimel. From midday and on Erev Pesach, one is not supposed to do malacha. Very interesting. Now again, what's the logic behind this? Since Erev Pesach is a day that you bring the carbon Pesach, so therefore again it becomes like a Yom Tov. The same reason we don't say Lam Natseach. It becomes like a Yom Tov. Because it becomes like a Yom Tov, therefore one should try to avoid doing malacha from midday and on. Ve'eno mutar la'asos rak mashemutar la'asos b'chol by the akum nogin lahatir. So therefore, again, now obviously it doesn't mean like a complete isra malacha, right? It doesn't mean like a complete isra malacha, like Shabbos or like Yom Tov itself. But what it means is, whatever you wouldn't do on Chalamayid, you don't do on Erev Pesach either. But through a guy, you could ask a non-Jew to do malacha for you. Some places had the custom that the entire day, even before midday, they wouldn't do malacha. Halacha dalid. If one is going to take a haircut or cut their nails, one should really do this before midday on Erev Pesach. If you forgot, you could cut your nails even after midday. However, again, the one shouldn't take a haircut after midday, unless, of course, one gets a haircut by a non-Jew. So what's interesting is about this, remember, so this whole idea of kind of curtailing activity as of midday is incredibly important, because since the Korban Pesach would have been brought, by midday, or after midday, so therefore halacha l'maisa, we really curtail all activity. So you have like two things going on over here. Number one is that Erev Yom Tov itself has the status of a Yom Tov, and number two, because it's the day on which the Korban Pesach is brought, therefore it really takes on the identity of a Yom Tov as well. All right, wonderful. Shkoyach, everyone. We'll stop over. We'll pick up with Sif Hey tomorrow. We'll get into some of the halachos of matzah consumption on Erev Pesach, and Shkoyach.